4-year-old Aron Siermans looked up at his paternal grandmother Anne and said, "Mummy's up there." The uneasy feeling in Anne's stomach grew, knowing that her daughter, Sharon, would never leave Aron unsupervised. Anne had gone to the house that the mother and son shared on Doveton Street in Ballarat, Victoria, Australia, after Sharon had failed to turn up for a prearranged meeting on April 6, 2013. Anne turned to her grandson once more, asking him to clarify. As she surveyed the house, she noticed a trail of blood on the floor, and calmly asked Aron what had happened. Much to Anne's horror, Aron replied, quote, "There was a big man coming last night, and he bashed Mummy with a baseball bat. Mummy won't wake up and give me any breakfast." End quote. The uneasy feeling in Anne's stomach grew. She ran outside to her boyfriend, who was waiting in the car, and asked him to go and check on Sharon, unable to do it herself through fear of what she might find. Her gut instinct was right, and as Anne's boyfriend entered Sharon's bedroom, he would come across a sight that would change the lives of the Siemens family forever. Sharon lay dead in her bed after suffering blunt force trauma to the head at the hands of a man she had met just once. The man who murdered her was a known rapist, abuser, and criminal, yet he was able to slip through the cracks and was given a parole period following a horrific string of assaults and rapes on women. When Sharon opened up the Plenty of Fish app, she had no idea of the nightmare that she was walking into. 29-year-old Sharon Siemens was a dedicated mother to her son, Aron. Sharon had met Aron's father, who has not been publicly named, whilst working for a commercial cleaning company. The two hit it off right away, and they quickly became an item. Sharon fell pregnant, the two moved in together, hoping to create a safe and stable home for their child. After 3 years, the relationship broke down, with Aron's father moving out, leaving just the two of them. Sharon was determined to make the best of a bad situation and throw everything that she had into creating a stable and happy life for her son, who was her world. She took a nail technician course and opened up a nail bar from the comfort of her own home. This job gave her the flexibility and independence that she needed to raise her young son. She could set her own hours, and with the nail bar being at home, she was always there for Aron when he needed her. Sharon and Aron were living at a rented property on Doveton Street in Ballarat from a family friend. Sharon had grown up in Ballarat and was familiar with the area and knew that she would be able to safely raise her son there and make a good life for herself. One article notes that Sharon had a mild intellectual disability, however, the scope of this is never discussed further. Despite all of the obstacles in her way, Sharon did everything she could to make life great for Aron, and those around her always spoke very, very highly of her. A few years after the relationship with Aron's father had broken down, Sharon decided it was time to get back out there and meet someone new. Sadly for Sharon, she would cross paths with the wrong man. A man who was known to Australian law enforcement, and a man who should have never been allowed to roam the streets. In early January 2013, Sharon browsed through the various dating apps available and downloaded the popular app Plenty of Fish. After creating a profile, she sifted through hundreds of profiles, getting a feel for people in her area. As she was swiping through profiles, one caught her attention in particular. 38-year-old Jason John Dinsley. The two matched and began chatting on the app, and they exchanged phone numbers and agreed to chat that way after getting to know each other a little bit better. By all accounts, the conversation between the two was great. They texted back and forth, and once they'd become more comfortable with each other and gotten to know each other a little bit better, they decided that it was finally time to meet in person for a first date. Through his series of texts, Jason put Sharon at ease, sending hearts and flower emojis and exuding positive energy. She had no fears about meeting him in person and wondered whether this could be the start of something wonderful. On January 19th, 2013, Jason and Sharon met at the Ballarat train station as per their agreement. The plan was for the two to head over to a local restaurant and get to know each other a little bit better over a meal. But when Jason stepped out of the train station, Sharon realised that he was nothing like his profile. She told friends that she felt sorry for him in a way and that he was smelly and dirty. Not wanting to be seen with him in public because she was embarrassed, Sharon invited him back to her house for a coffee. The two chatted over coffee and Sharon did her best to make polite, casual conversation. As the date progressed, Sharon became more and more uncomfortable in Jason's presence. So much so that she texted a close friend and asked her to fake an emergency so that she had an excuse to get away from Jason without seeming rude or abrupt. Following the phone call, Sharon drove Jason back to Ballarat train station and breathed a sigh of relief. She had finally gotten rid of him. Or so she thought. Jason did not handle this rejection well. Instead of accepting the fact that Sharon didn't want to see him anymore, he began harassing her and sending her death threats. Sharon tried to get on with her life and kept these threats a secret from her friends and family, probably in the hopes that if she ignored him, he would eventually get bored and go away. Between January and April of 2013, Jason's anger grew and culminated and resulted in one of Australia's most evil crimes. For months, he sat and planned how he could take his revenge on Sharon. And on April 6, 2013, that is exactly what he did. According to Jason, on the evening of April 6, 2013, he was out on a walk at around 2 a.m. when he passed Sharon's house on Doveton Street. Walking past Sharon's house awoke something inside of him and his rage just boiled over. Instead of continuing with his walk, Jason made the 1.6-mile journey home to retrieve a weapon. As he entered his home, he found a cricket bat, swung it into his hands, and knew that that was exactly what he needed. After retrieving the weapon, he walked another 1.6 miles back to Sharon's house on Doveton Street and began his brutal tirade. Jason broke into Sharon's home by removing glass panels and climbing in through a window. This noise, of course, woke Sharon up and she rushed to see what was going on, only to find Jason crawling through a window. Sharon confronted him, asking him what the hell he was doing in her house, but before she had time to defend herself or do anything, he swung and hit her over the head with the cricket bat that he had retrieved from his home. The blow knocked her to the floor and Sharon desperately held her hands up, trying to defend herself and make the beating stop. But Jason continued swinging. Her screams woke up her 4-year-old son, Aron, and Jason told her that she should check on him. Once Sharon had consoled Aron, who had witnessed some of the attack it is believed, she was forced back into her own bedroom where it was just her and Jason. Most of this information comes from the coroner's report, and according to this report, Jason tried to rape Sharon but was unable to get an erection. So in his rage-fueled state, he picked up the cricket bat once more and began swinging. When later asked by police how many times he had hit Sharon, Jason said that he didn't know, but he said that all he knows was, "I didn't stop." Sharon fought until the very end, but Jason overpowered her and killed her. Once he had finished, he stole her phone and left the house as if nothing had ever happened. Sharon's body was discovered the next morning by her mother's boyfriend after she had failed to show up for a prearranged meeting. This discovery rocked Sharon's family, and within minutes the police had arrived at the scene and opened their investigation. Forensic pathologist Dr. Melissa Baker of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine determined that Sharon's cause of death was blunt head injuries, and that, quote, Miss Siermans was noted to have an incised injury to the neck and multiple bruises over her left shoulder and right and left limbs. Some of the bruises were consistent with defense injuries, end quote. The report also stated that, quote, Dr. Baker noted that the force required to cause the head injuries was extreme, and that the head injuries would have been rapidly fatal. End quote. The Victoria Police began searching through Sharon's phone and social media and came across the various messages between herself and Jason Dinsley. Jason was brought in for questioning, where he pretty much admitted to everything. As a result, he was charged with murder, attempted rape, and aggravated burglary. He was placed in front of a court for his preliminary hearing, where he pled guilty on all 3 charges, which spared Sharon's family the trauma of going to trial. At his sentencing in December 2013, Jason Dinsley was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of at least 32 years. At the hearing, Justin Hollingworth addressed Jason saying, quote, "Murder is the most serious offence known to our legal system and our community, and this is an extremely serious example of that offence. Using a weapon which you have brought with you for the purpose of frightening or harming Miss Siemens, you engaged in a sustained, ferocious and cowardly attack on an unarmed, defenceless woman in her own home in the middle of the night. You may not have seen Aron on the night, but you are aware that Mrs. Siemens had a young child who lived with her. You were recklessly indifferent to whether or not he witnessed what you did to his mother, or found her body afterwards." End quote. During the sentencing hearing, details of Jason's prior convictions were released, and the public were shocked to find that he had over 140 convictions to his name. In 2002, he was found guilty of serious injury and unlawful assault. Then in 2006, he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of rape, aggravated burglary, false imprisonment, intentionally causing injury, robbery, and obtaining financial advantage by deception for a horrific crime that he committed against a woman in a St Kilda hotel in 2005. For his disgusting, horrific crimes, Jason was sentenced to just 9 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 6.5. By the time that 2012 had rolled around, he had been released after serving 7 years of his 9-year prison sentence, and was still on parole when he murdered Sharon. According to the coroner's report into Sharon's death, Jason was risk assessed shortly before he was released from prison, with the report saying, quote, "The initial assessment indicated Dinsley had a moderate risk of general reoffending. However, this was manually overridden by senior staff to record a high risk of reoffending." End quote. Jason had also been taking part in rehabilitation programs during his time in prison, and the report from this reads, quote, "His participation in this program was described as satisfactory." A report from Sex Offenders Program stated that Dinsley's participation in MMIOP, which is Modular Management and Intervention Program, said that he developed an increased level of insight into his offending and some limited risk management strategies. However, those strategies had not been tested in the community. Accordingly, it was suggested that Dinsley would benefit from continued psychological support whilst on parole. End quote. In 2011, a year before he was paroled, those in charge of Dinsley's assessments, quote, recommended Dinsley not be released on parole as he didn't have suitable accommodation, and it was recommended that the APB request a further parole plan. The parole assessment summary noted that his extensive criminal past and drug use, and that he was at high risk of reoffending. End quote. It appears that all of these warning signs were ignored, and just a year later, Jason was released on parole and ordered to report just twice a week. In February 2013, his parole officer noticed that he had begun slipping once more, but nothing was done about this. He had failed a drug test, and a report was submitted detailing his rapid decline. The parole office was told that they should get Jason to, quote, show cause as to why he should remain within the community, and this meeting was set to take place on April 8th, 2013. By April 8th, 2013, it was already too late. Sharon Siemens had been dead for 2 days. The Australian parole system and prison system and justice system showed systematic failings in its approach to Jason Dinsley and its regard for keeping women safe. Dinsley was allowed to be paroled despite knowing that he was a serious offender with prior convictions for harm against women and that he was at a high risk of reoffending. Sharon Siemens had no idea that she had matched with a volatile criminal on Plenty of Fish. If Dinsley had been more closely monitored and probably never paroled in the first place, Sharon's life could have been spared, and Aron wouldn't have had to have grown up without his mother.